Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew Campbell from Bloomberg. We're very pleased to have here Tony Bates of Skype, a veteran of Cisco and MCI who has the pleasure of running something that is a verb, like Xerox or Kleenex. We now Skype each other all the time, which I think is symbolic of just how integrated into a lot of our lives this little piece of software has become. And we'd love to hear from you a bit about what's going on in your world about a year after Skype joined Planet Microsoft.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, maybe just I'll start off and give you a little bit of an overview of sort of the scope and scale of Skype and what we're focused on. Just to sort of put it in perspective of those who don't know, Skype today, it's available in 171 countries. Last year, they do a survey every year. We're about 25% of the total minutes of traffic in the world's long-distance market. So when you think about country-to-country, international long-distance. So quite disruptive, like you say, for a small little piece of software. I'll give you a couple of the other numbers I think are very relevant, particularly for this conference. We've obviously been growing very dramatically in terms of our communications network. Last time I spoke publicly, we were at 250 million monthly active users. We just recently went over 280 million. So we continue to grow at a very fast pace, and that's, I think, a real testament not only to sort of our focus on multi-platform, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, because I think one of the themes here is four screen has been talked about a lot at the conference, and we've been very focused on all four screens. But also that we've had a number of areas of sort of real opportunity to continue to engage our user base and keep innovating across a number of platforms, but also really start to be heavily focused on becoming a seamless part of the overall Microsoft platform in general. So it's been a really good year. The momentum has kept growing, and I think there's two other things I would just touch on. You know, the way we think of Skype, and you saw a little teaser of it in the video, is really for most people the real use cases are those real deep human connections. That's increasingly becoming about a mobile connection. Obviously, earlier on it was really text and voice, but in a much more real-time nature than a lot of the other sort of social networks and communications technologies out there. But what we really see is it's starting to become that really deep inner circle. We like to think of Skype as really being that virtual kitchen table, that opportunity when you're away from your family or when you want to have those deep, close moments, people get on Skype. We have incredible stories. Many of you have probably read about it, about troops overseas who can't make it back to see their babies being born, people being married on Skype, when people make some of the toughest and most important decisions in their life, buying a house. When someone can't be there, use Skype to walk around the home, the prospective home. Buying a car is a very big decision for people, and they use Skype to do that. The only other thing I'd touch on is we're very committed to multi-platform, and you talked about Planet Microsoft, and I think one of the questions often at the beginning was, would we stay true to that? Our fastest growing part of the ecosystem is absolutely the mobile ecosystem. We're focused really on three major platforms, obviously iOS, Android, and Windows Phone 7, and now Windows Phone 8, which we're very excited about, and we just launched our preview app, and we think it really is the very strong and really, I think, the best experience integrated so far of Skype. But we're also focused on the living room, and to touch on the full screen and the discussion that was had earlier today, we actually are installed in somewhere between 40 and 50 million smart TVs around the world. So we've sort of the de facto standard for video calling on smart TVs, obviously on smartphones, tablets, and of course the desktop, which has really been the heritage both for Skype and Microsoft. So incredible momentum so far.
Now, on the subject of Planet Microsoft, one of the things we're seeing in the mobile world and more broadly in the world of the internet and communications generally is sort of cleaving into a few quite distinct ecosystems. iOS is increasingly its own thing. Google Maps, for example, is no longer available on the iPhone. Android, the same. Skype is something of an anomaly in that it is a service provided by Microsoft, which is behind one of these big ecosystems, that's very popular on the others. Could you see that becoming a problem going forward as the world becomes more segmented into these three or maybe four, if Amazon also has one, ecosystems?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be naive to say that couldn't happen in the future. I think so far what we've seen with the value proposition of Skype is that the users are going to live in a multi-platform world. we've been able to offer a tremendous choice. That the way we think about this experience is, we want you to be able to download Skype. You should walk up to the device of your choice on various different screen sizes, and you should get the same experience. And it should work pretty much in the same way. You'll actually see us start to converge even the way we think about the UI and the UX going forward. And so far, we've had great relationships with the other ecosystems. They provide APIs, and we make use of those. I think we do have an opportunity, and we're taking advantage of that with Microsoft, obviously, as part of Microsoft, that we have access to some deeper parts of the APIs. And I would encourage anyone who hasn't seen it to see. I think that the Windows 8 app and the Windows Phone 8 app are really the instantiations of what it means to be first and best with a communications experience. Tremendous traction on Windows 8 right now. We're the #1 app right now in the App Store. But we also, to your point, are very, we're sort of in the top 5 when it comes to social communications on iOS and Android. And so I think that will continue on as long as the user and the community embraces Skype in the way it has so far.
Now, obviously, the shift to mobile is something that preoccupies all of us. And one thing we are seeing in its infancy is the use of Skype on mobile phones, where people might otherwise make a conventional mobile call. We talk about cord cutting with televisions. Lots of people have gotten rid of their landlines. When do you think people will start getting rid of their mobile voice plans and just using Skype? Does that require ubiquitous Wi-Fi? I mean, what would have to happen?
Yeah, I think that a number of things would have to happen there, particularly around ubiquity of broadband in general. And this is an example here where even in the hotel you don't always have the best possible capability. I think what you're more likely to see is actually a mixture of both, with much deeper use over data as your primary communications service, if you like, with a potential backup across more traditional GSM lines. We see a lot of our users doing that today. They do it for a couple of reasons. One, I think we offer very competitive plans, but also many people want to have these much deeper, richer experiences, and video is really what's driving that for them. So, without kind of giving too much detail on the numbers, our fastest growing area of usage is mobile. And what's quite unique, and we talked about this briefly before we came on stage, is, I don't know the exact number, and it's going to vary by country and demographic and geo, but typically when you think about the engagement that you have on a cell phone call, it's pretty short. The average call length for Skype, and this is across multiple platforms, is 30 minutes. On a monthly basis, across the 280 million active users, we have an average engagement time of 2 hours and 55 minutes. And so I think the reason it's a little different to the way you sort of polarized a little bit between just a voice call, if you like, and replacement, is the way that people use Skype. And I think that's a huge opportunity when we think about many of the media folks in the room. So it's a very different level of engagement. It's really back to that deep human connection.
And something I think we're all wondering about, and one has to ask. Microsoft is a very complex company, very big, very different from the environment Skype used to operate in. How is that integration going? What have some of the challenges been?
Yeah, I think I'm very fortunate to have worked in a large organization for a number of years. For some of you don't know, I was at Cisco, and I ran a very large part of the company, and had been fortunate to have acquired many companies. And so I had a good view going in. I would say what we've done very well with Skype is we've been able to look first at sort of where it made sense to integrate. Sometimes I think you see this happen with companies that grow from founders who have very strong points of view, but sometimes as they get brought into a larger company, perhaps miss the bigger, broader vision. Sometimes they focus on the small stuff. And we didn't do that. We focused on the things that mattered, which is ultimately our users and creating the best possible product and experience. Clearly, it was very important for us to stay true to the value proposition of Skype, which was multi-platform. Steve understood that going in. That's part of the value. That's why I paid the $8.5 billion for. But I would also say that we've really been embraced in a way that is second to none. I have a seat at the leadership table, and everyone understands the power of communications, how it fits into their lives, both from productivity and collaboration in the workplace, but as part of everyone's lifestyle and more on the go. So, we've been very well embraced. You've seen a number of things that we've done. I would say in a short period of time, in a year, We've obviously, we've actually re-architected using some of the great assets of Microsoft to create an always-on, always connected capability in Windows 8 as well as in the Windows Phone 8 application. Probably the biggest challenge, as many of you know, to write applications is battery life, and so we've really focused hard on that. And they helped us tremendously with that. They helped us tremendously with scaling our back end, and that was everything. Often you have to go through as a smaller company, how do you take those steps? And I would say the other one, of course, is that we've brought the Windows Live Messenger audience to Skype, and we're in that transition. And that's a really big testament and affirmation to the trust that Microsoft as a whole has put into the Skype leadership and organization.
And those services will merge eventually.
They will, and we've announced that publicly. And we're sort of targeting the end of Q1, really, to make that migration happen. It's available now. You can start using your Microsoft account and really bringing your buddies from Windows Live Messenger into Skype. But of course, you get a much broader experience with the Skype capabilities. And that's a strategic decision that we've made together. And it just, to me, reaffirms the belief that they have in the company. The only other thing I'd say, Matt, just on this is one of the things that's very important, I think, and you see this happen time and time again, is that there's a joined up vision, but sometimes cultures are different. And at the root of what made Skype disruptive is that it's a very disruptive software company, and it was founded on Windows. And so that is a strong alignment that we have from day one. And the second thing that often goes wrong is even though there's alignment of culture and vision, people don't invest in the new company. And we've seen nothing but very strong investment from the corporation. And that's critical. And you can see that in terms of the amount of products that we're putting in the marketplace and the focus that we have.
And of course, Microsoft has been sustained over the years by very, very strong relationships with big corporate customers. And that has kept it going through some missteps in mobile and elsewhere. What can you tell us about Skype and its penetration into the workplace? And we had the experience when we were trying to set up this talk. I was asked, well, do you have a Skype ID at work on which we could speak? And I said, no, actually, we just use phones. And I think that's more common than not, though probably changing. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll give you a brief insight into it. Microsoft has a very strong communications and collaboration technology within the Office suite. Link.
Yeah.
And so for those who don't know, Link is a downloadable software that does a lot of the same things that Skype does in many ways, but is linked into Active Directory and all of the things that give you assurance in the enterprise. We've recently joined those two groups, and they report to me. What we see is we really see that one of the most powerful value props isn't necessarily Skype versus Link, but is in fact that most enterprises, the differentiation used to be is how do you have the best possible productivity within your enterprise? So what's your best phone system, how do you standardize and so on, or PBX system back in the early days. And now that differentiator moved, and it moved to how do you communicate well with other enterprises? But of course the real prize, and perhaps sort of relevant here, is how do you communicate more importantly with your end consumers, with your audience? And so what we really have is an opportunity to really bring, I think, the best of B to B to C in a way that nobody else has been able to do. And so that's sort of a teaser into the vision of where we're going, although it's early days in that.
But it is a consumerization phenomenon, though, in a way, right?
Absolutely.
Because everyone is using Skype at home, or many people are.
Yeah, and so there's two things happening. Consumerization of IT, so people want to have choice in the workplace. And of course, bring your own device is happening more and more. And that plays very much to the strength of that B2C connection. And we really believe that that's happening at a much faster pace than perhaps it was 2 or 3 years ago.
And you mentioned disruption, and obviously Skype is a technology that is disruptive to all kinds of incumbent people. You used to work at Cisco.
Yep.
Are the prospects for the likes of Cisco and its competitors getting dimmer as a result of the success of voice over IP?
Well, I think Cisco's a very strong competitor in some ways in the enterprise, and there's a place for in-room systems, which is sort of in a big focus for them, but there's also, I think, a place for more software orientation that plays to consumerization of IT. So I think that, things are moving there, but there's certainly in the world of communication and collaboration going to be a number of different scenarios. I would tell you where we're heavily focused is we partner with in-room system companies like Polycom, for example, to offer that value prop, but we do see more and more the vision I just laid out as sort of the future of where things are going.
And I'd like to shift gears a bit to talk about advertising, which of course is something we like to pay a lot of attention to here at the MMF. So could you tell us a little bit about where Skype's advertising proposition is going?
Yeah, absolutely. And I sort of want to just swing us back to those two key numbers, those two key things. And we're focused on really reach the audience, which I think is ultimately the most important thing in advertising. And we're going to continue to keep the sort of growth of the network. And there's two parts. One is endpoints. We estimate today we probably touch around 900 to 1 billion IP endpoints. If we look at the total downloads, so not to confuse the active users with the various amount of users over time. As many of you know, there's about 7 billion IP endpoints, maybe moving to 9 billion before we know it, multiple devices and so on. So there's still a huge opportunity there. So first and foremost, from an advertising context, we're going to continue to keep growing the audience. We're also going to continue to focus on engagement. I mentioned those numbers. They're pretty amazing when you step back and say, for those 280 million active users, they spend, on average, this is 2 hours, 55 minutes of engagement time in a deep and meaningful way with a very small group of that, of your closest friends or your closest colleagues. And so part of what we're going to be doing is broadening the experience. And it's going to show up in a few ways, Matt. One is more sharing moments in general, whether it's capturing moments that are very important to you, whether it's having the ability, as I talked about, to maybe share a customer service moment, a buying moment, and so on. So that's going to continue to evolve in the product. But we also think that there's a new way of doing ads, quite candidly. Frank touched on it earlier. We already introduced the notion of a conversation ad. And many people say, well, why would that be great? Isn't that just like another form of a pop-up or a display ad? Or, and we, of course, have branded ads today in the platform. But we think that there's a big difference is that particularly because this is a very trusted connection. If there's something that, as an ad that I want to share with you, for example, and we're friends on Skype and we talk, let's say 3 or 4 times a week, 30 minutes on average, even in a business context, you're more likely to find that very relevant and be more, have a deeper affinity and association with that. So that's one thing that we already have in place. We've added within the Windows 8 app, as Frank talked about earlier, ads are built into that platform and they're very contextual, very immersive. But we think it can go a lot further once you start to think about what it's really about isn't just sharing on a broad basis, but it's really getting to that deep level. So a couple of other things that we are very excited about. One is, in general, sponsored content. So if you think about it, 18 months ago, there was no ads in Skype. And we did a survey back then, and 35% of our audience, of a very large audience, just assumed they'd seen an ad in Skype. So it wasn't that it was a foreign concept, but we think that
people didn't even realize
they didn't realize because it's a wonderful free service for many of our users. We do have, a good paying telecommunications business, but they weren't afraid of ads. And we think that we offer a very valuable sort of rich brand to our users. And so the notion of a sponsored ad coming back actually creates tight brand affinity on both sides. We think you can take that further and say that, once you have that relationship, you can do this in an intimate way. The one I like to think about is, I touched on it before, some of the use cases of where people are, sharing very closely, often with their family, like buying your first car is a great example. That's a big deal. It's perhaps the biggest purchase of someone's life. And they want to talk to their friends about it. They want to perhaps go online. With Windows 8, by the way, today, as a tablet device, for example, on the Surface, it already has a notion of being able to do things in parallel. It has a thing called Snap View, if you haven't seen it. So today, you could look at an ad, or you could look at a piece of web content, and you could have a two-way conversation. Instead of that used to be multiple devices, it can be done on a single device. We think that can extend even to smaller screen, to mobile in the future. And so this notion can actually happen with inside Skype as we move forward. We actually think this can go beyond this in the future, where you could have a sponsored group or a sponsored brand that could be literally like a contact within your Skype set of contacts, and then you could actually have a deep and meaningful conversation. So we see the world moving to video, very interactive, and something that's really about that human connection. Now, there's some work to do. Obviously, we have the basics of behavioral targeting like everyone else, but there's actual real affinity in the way that we think about social. And so we think that this is a big shift in many ways. So one, we're very open to those ideas, and we're meeting with people here Two, the size of the audience and the amount of engagement just almost sets us apart, I think, in the way that people should start to think about advertising moving forward.
No one, I think it is fair to say, no one, not Google, not Facebook, not Microsoft, and certainly not Apple, has cracked mobile advertising, found a way to advertise effectively on mobile devices in a non-annoying fashion.
Yeah.
What's it going to take?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One, it's got to be in an experience that's relevant to the context that you're in. One of the ideas we have is, many of you probably know about click-to-call businesses, where they're lead generation business, where we have this today within Skype on the web, where you can install a very small plugin, and when you go to any site that has an 800 number or so on, you can have a seamless experience rather than picking up your phone and do that out of the web. And
that's not available on mobile devices.
It's not yet, but that's an example of it where you could have a set of triggers, if you like, when you're in an experience and you want to share that would then create that experience. Now, I think the trick's going to be with the screen, can you do the sort of snap view equivalent, as I just talked about, with mobile devices? In many ways, I think of the snap view almost as like the mobile experience, because it's about the same screen size form factor. So what I would say is I think we have the building blocks in place for a next generation experience, but I think you're right, no one's cracked the code per se. What I can tell you from a Skype point of view, we won't be coming at it from the traditional concept of a little branded bar or a little pop-up display, because I do think that gets in the way of the experience. I think that gets in the way of the general experience of using mobile, and that's why it's been very tough for people to crack that. But we're very excited that we've got most of the pieces in there, and now it's running through these different scenarios and the triggers. But you can imagine so many in daily life where people are using Skype, so it's not too much of a leap to take the next step in that.
And just to mix it up a little bit as we come to the end here, is there anyone in the world of technology, of communication, outside of Microsoft who you look at and say they're using advertising in a really innovative way, and they've really figured something out that was missing?
Relative to communications, I don't think so at this stage. I think it's sort of interesting that at the beginning of the video there you saw Jimmy Kimmel and folks using Skype. So you could say in a different way, I'm sort of flipping it around a little bit. There's a lot of media and rich content that's now incorporating communications, and that, of course, is a form of advertising. I think where you were coming at the question, to make it super seamless within it, I would say as communications like Skype, and in particular Skype, becomes a much more seamless and immersive experience, the next generation dial pad, as you kind of alluded to, and so you don't even know what mode you're in. You just get the best possible experience that you want for the context of whatever you want to do. If I want to escalate my experience from text to audio to video, I can do that with you in Skype very seamlessly. As that becomes more pervasive and doesn't seem like a separate modality, then I think there is optionality to bring new immersive interactive ads directly into it. Think of it almost as the communications now becomes a channel, and the ads sit on top, but not in a disruptive way, as part of the experience. And we've got things to do there. We've got to be more intelligent. We need to respect people's privacy and so on, but I do think there's a big opportunity. And that's the vision we really have at Skype, that it's seamless, pervasive, and it's always with you, and it's there whenever you want it to be.
And one continent of Planet Microsoft we haven't touched on is the one that is perhaps the most successful consumer product at the moment, which is, of course, the Xbox.
Xbox, yeah.
Where does Skype fit into that?
Yeah, that's one of those ones I'd say watch this space.
Okay.
I touched on the living room. There's obvious areas that we can collaborate. One of the things you mentioned is, what was it like in the first year? And we were very careful in the planning phases to stay true to, the core aspect of Skype. Skype's vision is very simple. It's to be the only communications provider on the planet that reaches billions of people to share experiences every day. And so with that, we need to go where our users are, and that meant focusing on mobile, which we've done. You've seen that both in terms of Android and iOS, and now very focused on, I think, the best and seamless experience in Windows Phone. And so we had to prioritize it a little bit. I mean, this is something you have to do, but I would say watch this space. We're collaborating highly, and it's a very exciting area. I do think what Xbox has been able to do as a gateway to content, to media, to entertainment, and to experiences way beyond just games is obviously, for us, a very, very powerful asset, and something that we think is going to be a very important part of communications moving forward.
Great. Well, we will have to leave it there in keeping with Spencer's injunction to run this like the Swiss railways.
Yeah, right on time.
So please join me in thanking Tony for taking the time, and we'll be watching with great interest.
Thank you.